Okay, so today we're going to start reviewing equations of lines, and so this is something that you should have done in Algebra 2, and it's something that you'll also need for calculus, so we're going to review it. The first two things that you need to know to write the equation of a line, or the first things that you need to find, are a slope, so you have to have a slope, and you have to have a point. Alright, in order to find the slope, you can use the slope formula. So if you have 2 points, x1, y1, and x2, y2, then to find the slope of the line that goes through those 2 points, you're going to use this formula. M just stands for slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And that'll give you your slope once you simplify. Okay, once you have this, you can use either one of the 2 points that you're given to write the formula, or write the equation of the line using this formula, the point slope formula. Y minus y1 equals the slope you found, m, times x minus x1. And those should look familiar. So let's look at an example. The first one we're going to look at, we want to write the equation of the line through the given points. So before I do anything, I've got to find the slope of the line between those 2 points. So m is going to equal, this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2. So I'm going to do y2, which is 1, minus y1 over x2, which is 3, minus a negative 2 becomes positive. So this is going to end up being 1/5. Now, to find the equation of the line, I'm going to use y minus y1, the formula, but it doesn't matter which of the points I use. I'm going to try to use the easier one whenever I do these. And so usually an easier point to use is going to be a point that has a 0 somewhere in it. So I'm going to use the first point. So y minus y1 with a 0 equals m times x minus a negative 2 becomes plus again. So then all I have to do is simplify this to find my equation of the line. So that's just going to be y minus 0 is just y. And when I distribute the 1/5 to the x and the 2, that's going to be 1/5 x. And when I multiply 1/5 by 2, you can do that in the calculator and then write your answer as a fraction. Or what you can do is think about it like this. If I've got 1/5, that's a 5. 1/5 times 2, this is like a 2 over 1. And when I multiply fractions, I'm going to multiply straight across. So that's going to be 1 times 2 is 2. And then 5 times 1 is 5. So I'll have 1/5 x plus 2/5 for the equation of my line. And so then what kind of line, or what should this line look like? Since I know that my slope is positive, I know that my line should increase from left to right, or rise as we go from left to right, since that's a positive slope. Another way that we could check to make sure that this equation is correct is I could plug it into my calculator, into my y equals, and then when I go to the table, these 2 points should be included in there, and if they're not, then something's wrong. Let's try number 2. I'm going to find the slope. So m equals, this is x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so this is going to end up giving me a negative 5 over 1, which is a negative 5 when I simplify. So either one of the points I can plug into the formula. I'm going to use the one with the 0, the first one. So I'm going to do y minus y1, which is 4, equals negative 5 times x minus 0. And so then when I solve or simplify this, y minus 4 is going to equal a negative 5x. When I distribute the 5 to the 0, that term's just going to go away. It's just going to be 0. So then all I have to do to solve is add the 4. So y equals a negative 5x plus 4. Alright, and so since this slope is a negative, I know that my answer, or my line, should, instead of increase with a positive slope, it's going to fall with a negative slope. So my graph is going to decrease from left to right. Okay, number 3. Again, start by finding the slope. So this is going to end up being y2 minus y1 is going to be 2 minus 2 over x2 minus x1 is going to be 2 minus a negative 1, so that becomes plus. So I'm going to have 0 over 3. Now, whenever we have a fraction, 0 over a number is always going to be 0. And the way that I remember that is if I have 0 over a number, any number, it doesn't matter, let's just call it k, then that's going to be 0, and that is okay. So it's okay to have a 0 in the top. And so if I have a 0 in the top, it's always going to be 0. So the slope of this line is 0. So I'm going to use the y equal, or y minus y1 formula, and then use either one of the other 2 points to write my equation of the line. So I'm going to use 2, 2 on this one, because I've used the first one on the other 2. So y minus y1 is going to be, I'm going to use this point, so that's going to be 2, equals, the slope is 0, times x minus x1, which is also 2. Now, whenever I go to simplify this, this side is going to end up becoming 0 because it's 0 times the whole thing. So I'm going to have y minus 2 equals 0, and so then y equals 2. This kind of line, or this equation, is always going to give us a horizontal line. And so if my slope is ever 0, then the equation is going to be a y equals number, and it's going to go through the y coordinates of my point. Okay, because if you think about it, if we go graph those 2 points, negative 1, 2 would be here, 2, 2 would be here, and so the only kind of line that would go through those 2 points is a horizontal line, and that would just be the line y equals 2. Alright, last one before we get to some other examples. So the slope of this one, I'm going to do y2 minus y1, 1 minus a negative 3 becomes plus, 4 minus 4 in the bottom. That's going to end up being 4 over 0, and so this is how I think of this. If I have a number over 0, I'm just going to call n a number, n. So n over 0 is undefined, so no. Can't have 0 in the bottom, that won't work. So 0 over k is okay, n over 0 is no, and that won't work. So if you get this, this is an undefined slope. Now, it doesn't make sense to plug in an undefined slope to the y minus y1 formula. So what we're going to do, if we ever get an undefined slope, that means instead of having a horizontal line, we're going to have a vertical line. And if we think about these 2 points, if I go graph them, over 4 down to negative 3 would be here, over 4 up 1 would be here. And so the only type of line that would go through those 2 points is a vertical line. Now, a vertical line is always going to be, instead of a horizontal line being y equals, a vertical line is going to be x equals. And it's going to be whatever the x coordinate is, okay? So the x coordinates of these 2 points are 4, so my equation is going to have to be x equals 4. And so those are the 4 different types of slopes we could have: a negative, positive, 0, or undefined. And so those are what our lines are going to look like depending on the slopes that we have. So let's look at equations of parallel and normal lines. You've heard these called parallel and perpendicular lines before. Normal just means perpendicular. So whenever you get to calculus, whenever you get to calculus, a lot of times normal lines are going to be called perpendicular lines. And so I just start calling them normal in pre-calculus so you get used to hearing that word. So we're going to write the equation of a line through 5, negative 1, and negative 5, 5. So first thing I've got to do is find the slope. So I'm going to say y2 minus y1 is going to be 5 plus 1 over negative 5 minus 5. And so this is going to end up giving me a 6 over a negative 10. And so when I take that and reduce it and simplify, this is going to end up giving me a negative. 2 will go into both of those, so 2 goes into 6 3 times, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. So a negative 3/5 for the slope. Now, to write the equation of the line, I'm going to use y minus, and I'm going to use that second point. So y minus y1 equals my m times x minus a negative, which becomes plus 5. So then I'm going to distribute and simplify. So when I distribute, I'm going to come up here. This is going to end up giving me y minus 5 equals a negative 3/5 x. And whenever I multiply negative 3/5 times 5, we can do it the way that we did it before in the other example. Or if you wanted to plug it into your calculator and use your calculator to simplify, this is how we would do it. It takes a second for my calculator to load. Okay, so if I wanted to multiply my -3/5 by 5, I could just do it like this. Plug in my -3/5, times it by 5, and that would end up giving me a -3, which is what we would also get if I did it the other way and put the 5 over 1 and multiplied straight across. So then the only other thing I have to do is take that 5 and add it over. So y equals a -3/5 x. -3 plus 5 is going to end up giving me a +2, and so this is my line that goes through these 2 points. Now, for part B, I want to write the equation of a line that's parallel to the line in part A, that's this, through this point. So, parallel lines have the same slope. Okay? So parallel lines have the same slope, which means I'm going to use the exact same slope that I found up here for this first line. So that's going to end up being, m is -3/5. Alright, now I also need to make sure that my line goes through this point, -3, 4. So if I want a parallel line to this one that goes through this point, I've got to use the same slope and the point they gave me for y minus y1 equals slope, -3/5 times x minus a -3 would become plus. Alright, so then when I distribute the -3/5, this is going to be -3/5 x, and then this is going to end up being, if you plug it in the calculator, or if you just make this a 3 over 1 and say -3 times a 3 is a -9, 5 times 1 is a 5, I would get -9/5. Now, when I add the 4 over, so I'm going to add the 4 to both sides right here, my equation or my line is going to end up being y equals -3/5 x. You can think about this as, if I turned 4 into a number with a fraction or with a denominator of 5, this would be 20 over 5. So this would end up being plus 11 over 5, or if that doesn't make sense, we'll get into common denominators later, so if that doesn't make sense now, you can just take these and add them on the calculator and turn your answer into a fraction. So there's my parallel line. Now, we want to write the equation of the line through these 2 points. So the first thing I'm going to do is go find slope. So I've got 5 minus 2 divided by, this is going to be a -4, minus a -4 becomes plus, so I end up with 3 over 0, which no, can't happen. So this is going to give me an undefined slope. Now, the kind of line that we have when we have an undefined slope is a vertical one. So a vertical line is always x equals, and it's going to equal the coordinates of the point, so this is -4. Now, I want the equation of a normal line. And so a normal line is just a perpendicular line, so if I have a vertical line and I want a normal line, it would have to be like this. It would have to be a horizontal line, okay? So if here's my vertical line, a normal line would have to be horizontal. So I want a horizontal line. I know if I have a horizontal line, the slope is 0, okay? So slope is 0. So I'm going to use a 0 slope, and it's going to go through that point. So if I do that, y minus y1 would be plus 8 equals m times x minus x1. That's just going to end up being y equals, this whole side's going to go away, so it would just be -8. Now, you can go through that process where you plug it in the formula, or you can just see that, hey, my y coordinate there is -8. And so my horizontal line that I'm looking for would have to be this y equals -8. It has to go through that -8 coordinate. Alright, last one. The slope of a line is -4/3. And I don't know if I'll have time to do this one on this video, so I'm going to stop and then I'll record another video.